Blessed be the Lord my strength, who teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. And we are joined on Great Awakenings once again by the great Dr. James Fetzer, and we're going to be jumping into war, both war internationally and war domestically, war against domestic enemies who have assumed the Democrat position running for president, Kamala Harris, and this new clown, Waltz. We'll be looking at him and her. And we'll also be looking at Iran and Israel and how this is shaping up with the great Dr. James Fetzer. Jim, it's good to have you on. I'll just hand it to you and let's jump right in and see what's happening. Go ahead.
My great pleasure, Scott. I got to admit, this very first image may be the most unnerving I've ever witnessed. This is B-52s in Romania, Scott. B-52s in Romania. Very, very bad. Here's a actual video of them. As you well know, that may be the most awesome weapon ever designed by the hand of man, and that they're in Romania. The Russians are going to have to deal with this, Scott. They're going to have to destroy those planes. There's just no way around it. And that then invites the question, what happens? Because this was a colossal act of stupidity to put those strato fortresses in Romania. I just can't believe that the numbskulls running our government have put us in such danger.
Well, just to sum it up real quick, we are suffering a military cadre, a military leadership that is toxic with political correctness, effeminacy, transgenderism, and bravado, unjustified bravado, bluff. They're coming out of the academies and their junior officer positions in the 1990s when America was something to behold. No longer. And Russia, they're thinking Russia is the same Russia of the 1990s. Ragtag, drunken, vodka, scatterbrained, part at the seams. No longer. Russia has assumed a czarist empire, but a republic form of empire, a tribe, really. And I've been there, where the people have anointed President Putin as their czar to carry them through the enemies that surround them, which is a mindset that Russia has always had for thousands of years. And matching the Russian mindset with the Russian czar government tribalism to this shallow, empty bravado of political correctness that the American generals think that they can fly B-52s around and cross into airspace is, like you said, extraordinarily dangerous, reckless, stupid, because the Russians aren't going to play around. And the Russians have taken the gloves off, and they're waiting for the Americans to come across the mat and step on their toes. And they're going to get an uppercut, knocking them off the mat and on the ground. And Russia is going to say, you want more? This is how this is going to go. And Russia is patient, but the American bravado and recklessness, they think that they're going to intimidate Russia into some sort of acquiescence or coming to the peace negotiation table. And I think it's going to have the opposite effect, Jim.
Oh, I agree 100%, Scott. And the situation is rather parallel to what's going on in the Middle East. Hundreds of Iranian missiles are in firing position. They're targeting strategic facilities, even across Jerusalem. The U.S. is sending fighters to try to shoot down these missiles, but I'm telling you, it's not going to work. Iran will attempt a spectacular blow to the heart of Israel. The U.S. is urgently moving additional reinforcements from Western intelligence, speaking of a very dangerous, radically different compared to the attack of April, Iranian assault that'll take place in 3 stages, the main target being Jerusalem. For this reason, the U.S. moved an F-22 Raptor squadron from Ilmendorf in Alaska and an F-A-18 from the carrier Theodore Roosevelt into the vicinity. The U.S. is concerned about both the depth and breadth of the Iranian attack and Israel's response. They do not even rule out a possible Israeli deterrent strike. That would be a preemptory strike. The U.S. is concerned about preemptive action by Israel. They even asked Jerusalem for early notification if the Israelis strike first. Characteristically, Israeli Defense Secretary Gallant told Israeli pilots and Air Force to prepare for the unexpected, to be ready to act at short notice. Here you have some of the notices, some of the tweets, some of the messages that have been sent out about it, confirming the points I've been making. The movement of Iranian missiles across the country has begun. The U.S. had detected Iranian preparations from military response to Israel. They've observed the Iranian armed forces conducting military exercises as well as moving ballistic and missile-armed launchers across the country. Iran's aviation organization issued a NOTAM today warning pilots and aviation authorities of live fire drills in western Iran August 7th and 8th. They've actually sealed their airspace. They've created a no-fly zone. 3 officials said during a briefing with President Biden and VP Harris, members of the national security team said there were several variables of an Iranian retaliatory strike still unknown. They expect several waves, one from Hezbollah, one from Iran, another from other Iranian-backed groups. They don't know which attack will come first. They're concerned Iran learned from his last attack and that the upcoming attack could be drastically different. I predict it will be. In-game World War III tweets, estimates in Israel. Hezbollah will attack first. The warning will be short. Israel's at peak readiness. Iranian International. The Iranian Aviation Organization has said NOTAM Tuesday to warn pilots about a risk. Get this. Iranian missile target Knesset and other strategic targets. According to the Israelis, as mentioned, Hezbollah will attack first. Israel is preparing for the possibility Hezbollah will launch precision missiles first before Iran. Unlike Iran, Hezbollah's proximity will make it difficult to prepare in time. Plus, of course, it also is an opportunity for the Iranian missiles to reach their target while Israel is dealing with a Hezbollah attack. Israel estimates the Axis will target location of high strategic value such as the Knesset, the Prime Minister's office, Israeli Defense Headquarters in Tel Aviv, Mossad headquarters, Air Force IDF intel bases. Other targets include power plants, seaport, military base, airports. I believe that's exactly right. An Israeli reservist told the Wall Street Journal you could not recall a time with such a scale of defense preparedness for a war in the north. Jerusalem is the target, the Israelis say, and they explain why. The possibility of a rocket attack on Jerusalem in the next war is 100%. Intel experts have already mapped potential damage, calculated the expected death toll from a missile report. Colonel Shalom Ben Yair, recently completing term as head of Jerusalem Home Front Command, there will definitely be a wave of rockets. In response to the threat, Israel is taking a multi-layered approach to protecting Jerusalem. They approved the conversion of more than 20 underground parking lots into bomb shelters. At the same time, security and rescue forces have conducted simulations. The Knesset Guard received special training to enhance their preparation. Israel also plans to deploy extensive air defense to protect Jerusalem, including the David Sling. The multi-layered defense strategy aimed to provide more comprehensive protection. However, officials warn there's no way to completely neutralize the threat, and I guarantee it will not be successful. According to a previous report, IDF estimates Iran's axis is ready to target government buildings in Jerusalem, including the Knesset. Iran's goal is to disrupt decision-making processes during the war, create chaos and uncertainty in the city, undermine the civil military chain of command. Another critical goal is to strike the heart of Israeli identity, inflicting a psychological blow to the nation's population. Jerusalem, with its deep religious and symbolic significance, is a primary target of this strategy. Moreover, an attack on Jerusalem would mean a direct challenge to Israel's sovereignty over its capital. It could rally support from Arabs and Muslims worldwide. Here, fakest news. It is really reservists. Can't remember a time. Another, Damona municipality in the Negev has opened public bomb shelters. Iran closes all government offices and banks in Tehran. All government office banks in Tehran and neighboring provinces, indicating a high level of caution and preparation for a possible preemptive strike by Israel, or perhaps a retaliatory if Iran launches its retaliation for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. Whatever the actual reason, a government closing of offices and banks is a serious thing. Something wicked this way comes. Meanwhile, suffocating pressure inside Israel for a preemptive strike on Iran and a generalized war. Meanwhile, there's been a Russian arms airlift to Tehran. G. Lapid observes an entire country is sitting and waiting to be bombed. A preemptive strike against Iran, something leading to a generalized war, is being asked of Netanyahu by the opposition and many top officials of the defense and security sector. The pressure is growing after the confirmation about the transfer of Russian weapons to Tehran. Everything shows the Middle East is going through very critical moments. This Iranian attack will not just end like last time. According to the Israeli media, Israel is preparing for an immediate response when Iran attacks. Israeli Defense Minister Golan visited the Israeli Air Force Underground Command and Control Center at IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv's Zakiria to ensure preparations are complete. He pointedly stated, "We have to be prepared for anything, including a quick transition to offense." This is a new norm where the normal Northerners won't get a hint from the government about when they can get home. The new norm is that new parents don't go to a public park because it's far from a shelter. Foreign airline don't want to fly here because there's no one to trust. Everyone is waiting and waiting, but don't know what they're waiting for. Meanwhile, there's an official Russian delegation in Iran. Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu has arrived for a planned working visit. I expect him to be there for the duration of this attack. He may be there for a week or even longer. Shoigu will hold talks with his Iranian counterpart, Ali Akbar Ahmadian, the Chief of General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Mohammad Bagheri. He'll be received by Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. According to Russian media, Moscow has decided to upgrade military cooperation with Iran. Lots of signaling from Tehran today, with the Secretary of Russia's Security Council meeting with the Chief of Staff of the Iranian regime's armed forces. I don't think his predecessor ever had such a public meeting when he traveled to Iran, Scott. The Iranians are very serious and not to be underestimated. This is going to be a severe blow to Israel of the kind, the caliber, the intensity they have never experienced remotely. It's going to be devastating.
Well, see, this is an interesting situation too, because if I was Iran, I wouldn't rush into this attack. I would let time linger like a Chinese water torture. I would keep the Israelis on alert. I would keep their entire IDF military on alert, on standby. That is a psychological tremor, a tension that they can't long endure. This is a volunteer National Guard sort of army. So Iran isn't in a rush. It shouldn't be in a rush. And by advertising its strike intention, I personally think that shows enormous strength and confidence because it doesn't need to be surprising. That's the other thing. Psychologically, the Israelis who operate in secret, in sneakiness, they lie, they kill, murder, assassinate. The Iranians don't do that. The Iranians, by demonstrating above board, transparent, we're coming, we're coming, we're coming, it shows, I mean, enormous power and strength, even if it's just a psychological bluff kind of thing. But I think letting this linger and letting it drone out is a very powerful way to fray the nerves of the Israelis and the Americans. If they're launching aircraft, Jim, these aircraft require maintenance, and you're only, if you're running aircraft 24/7 in sorties, waiting for a strike, those aircraft, if you let it linger a few days, have to return to the deck and get fixed. And so we'll see what happens. There's a chance that they could strike, and I think they'll do it at night. And right now it is. Uh, well, it won't be now. It's 4:55 a.m. in Tehran, so it won't be at least for another 24 hours, I'd say. Maybe 18 hours from now at the earliest. But don't be surprised if they take their time for a whole week and let this percolate. That's the winning way to strategically and Machiavellianly exhaust your enemy. So we'll see if they do. Jim, hand it back to you.
I'm very impressed. Iran, of course, has notified the United Nations that they're going to conduct this retaliatory strike under Article 51 of self-defense of the UN Charter. And the Secretary General of UN has acknowledged their right to do so. So they've been as above board and in accordance with international law as any nation has ever been, Scott. It's really remarkable and, in my opinion, wholly admirable. So,
well, anyone who's been to Iran knows that they are a different animal. They are they are very regal, and I don't say this in any gushing complimentary way, but as an observer, I've been there. They're regal, they're majestic, they're very low key, they're very superior, but they're also very humble and friendly. There's no erraticism, there's no emotional volatility. There's no dishevelment or disorganization in them. They are a very old and incredibly powerful people and culture and government, and we have no idea about the complexity and the depths of the Iranians. And it's an ignorance that is going to come about and really haunt us. And I'll put it this way: this is a conflict and a fight that we've already lost. We have no chance of victory in any kind of operation against Iran because, like you had identified too, Russia is on the side of Iran, providing all of the needs that Iran may have, not offensive, but defensive, and Yemen. So that entire region is fortified. And what would happen first, Jim? The entire Strait of Hormuz and all of the oil shipments would be shut down. Everything going to the West would be shut down. Everything going to the EU, Europe, NATO would be shut down, held hostage, but it would also be reopened up. And this is where diplomatic war comes in by making negotiated settlements and treaties with the individual countries of the EU. Sure, Luxembourg, you can get a tanker of oil. Just come out of this NATO EU hysterical hatred against Iran. And I think if they play that game, they're only going to be more and more victorious. It's sad, but it's also laughable. But that the United States has crumbled in its diplomatic capacity so badly, so quickly. And I think it's purely spiritual delusion that God has given blindness to this country to suffer in ways that we're just beginning to recognize. Jim?
This event, I predict, will make it very clear that Israel has met its match.
Yes. Yes.
Meanwhile, there are events in the UK. Rioting is spreading as Muslims attack whites with abandon. They're on the brink of civil war, and it's growing, spinning out of control. It's an all-out war scenario now in cities across Great Britain, with the murder of 3 little girls, the final straw causing people to say they've had enough. These are the 3 little girls who were murdered by a savage black in cold blood in England. This was published the day after it happened. This is what is sacrificed on the altar of diversity. People magazine reported a 17-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of the 3 young girls who died following a stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga class in Southport, England. Pity the parents. They send their kids off to a very conventional routine activity and they wind up dead. In the early hours of Thursday, August 1st, Merseyside police confirmed in a news release that the teen had been charged with killing BB King 6, Elsie Stancombe 7, and Alice Saba Aguilar 9 in the knife attack, which took place around 11:50 local on Monday, July 29. 17-year-olds also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article. The attacker just happened to be in a fundraising commercial. Was the attack on the kids planned in the hope of promoting a civil war? The guy who stabbed 3 girls to death in Southport was in a BBC fundraising commercial as Doctor Who. There he is on the lower right and in the center left. Muslim immigrants in Blackburn shouting Allah Akbar to hunt down British patriots. Where are the British police with their truncheons, dogs, and horses? Muslim immigrants are gathering in many cities shouting Allah Akbar to hunt down British. A civil war has begun. If you're in England, be on high alert. Muslims hunting for whites. No police in sight. They're beating them up with 2x4s. Blue-eyed devil tweets, how many English people must die before the people push back against their tyrannical leaders and the plutocrats who seek to destroy civilization of the whites? Look how many have died. More. Britain's riot carnage deepens. Police hurt after bricks are hurled at cops. Far-right thugs clash with Muslim groups as violence rages in Liverpool and Manchester, with Yob setting cars on fire in Hull. They're just a simple working class that's had enough. And the media is also blaming the outcry on misinformation. Can you believe that? They don't want the world to know they have a reasonable right to protest. Those are the whites. UK riots flared in another UK city following misinformation about the Southport stabbing. Scott, this is just one story. There's a whole abundance that's going on and it's growing in more cities. Our friend is so concerned that if the whites don't fight back, they're going to be gone. They're going to be wiped out, just as happened to whites in South Africa. It is very serious indeed.
Well, there's a couple things to observe about this. The Israelis were dancing and celebrating in joy and glee about this happening, that the British are rising up and fighting, and this is occurring, which raises a red flag to me. Because I think, okay, is Mossad involved? Is it a Mossad operation stabbing these little white girls to ignite this fire? As the Israelis do, they have created this 9/11 menace against Muslims, and it's an accelerant. So the Muslim population, particularly these black, Muslims and stuff, and blacks in general down there, they're dumb as a bag of rocks. They're violent. They're stupid. Their IQs are like 70. They're just a very low class garbage people, and you've got low class garbage British politicians that have brought them in. I know Britain. I was born in Scotland. I've got relatives in Scotland and Wales and Ireland, not English. My dad's side is ancient English and German, but the British are a different breed, and they're very patient. They're not necessarily religious anymore, which I think is their detriment. But when their backs up against the wall, they will fight and they will come out swinging. And what is detrimental is their government is so hostile against them. So this needs to be one. You can't rush into this battle, with a rebel yell, suicidal final jaunt. You have to diplomatically begin to peel away the levels of your enemies. So there has to be diplomatic communications to the religious leaders, to these figures in the Muslim society that come against this individual who stabbed the girls, to say this is not Islam, and bring calm. It can't be developed into a white versus brown, British versus Africans and Muslims, because that just is a foolish way to wage that sort of a war. They have to engage at diplomatic level as well as the kinetic, but this is going to have to result in people pulling out of certain areas of Manchester or Britain and Liverpool to reorganize. And if they don't, it is a V for Vendetta moment. It can it can translate very quickly into a bloody British Civil War that we've never seen before, that could also catch fire in France and Germany and elsewhere. So I'm watching this very carefully to see how this erupts and grows. But inevitably, Jim, my confidence is always on the Britons. They will fight and they will defend with a Churchillian, we will fight on the island, we will fight in the streets and fight on the hills, we will never surrender. That's in their DNA and blood. And they can go very intelligently in how they wage this fight. They can go assassin guerrilla war fight, and the Irish Republican Army, against the Brits in the 70s, 80s. This could translate into something very, very lethal very quickly. But I think it's the beginning of something that has been brewing for a while. We'll see what happens. But what is happening over in Britain too may be a precursor of what is coming into the United States. You could see these sort of things kick off with the Mexican Hispanic cartel gangs and doing similar things. So I expected that is going to be coming to disrupt the election and cause us to be forced into to suspend the elections. I think the American elections of 2024 are going to be suspended because of domestic violence. I hope I'm wrong, but I just have a feeling that is strategically how it's going to play out. Jim?
I think it's highly probable, Scott, and I think that the backlash against the migrant invasion is going to spread across Europe and here sooner than later, in my opinion.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Trump remains Trump, while the Dems recon Kamala. Following the attempt on his life, many of his supporters, even some detractors, anticipated a new Trump, one who would be more humble and less bombastic. In their minds, more relatable to undecided voters. Initially, there is indication it might be the case, but his convention speech and subsequent appearances proved there would be no new Trump. While many lamented the fact, Trump was fortunate not to fall into the trap. Despite the heinous assassination attempt, if Trump had suddenly become someone unrecognizable to the electorate, many in the public would have wondered if he had a personal conversion to conviction or a political conversion to convenience. Further, many of his supporters would have been disappointed had he become melancholy or milquetoast. After all, in the immediate aftermath, Trump's instinctive reaction was to raise a fist and called for fight, 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 not a call for quiet contemplation upon the vicissitudes of fate. In resisting calls for a kinder, gentler Trump, the GOP nominee retained the singular character trait that availed him well in his 2016 rise to the White House. Perhaps less so in 2020. That's only because that election was stolen. It actually worked for him as well there, where my best estimate, he earned over 100 million votes to about 37 for Biden, but leaves him well positioned for victory in 2024. Indeed, it's a trait not even his enemies deny, and instead base every of their scurrilous slanders upon, namely, Trump's authenticity. Well, many believe the lack of a new Trump harms its current candidacy. There's stronger evidence. The old Trump's authenticity is attracting new voters among minorities and blue collar to the GOP and mega standard. They are attracted, can relate to a person who retains the courage of his convictions and refuses to be silenced by the machinations of his opponents, who often use a selective, coercive enforcement of the state police power against him to turn into a muted version of himself. Trump would only risk alienating both those new voters, but many of his old. Their expectations subverted and disappointed, they could not help but wonder if it were a personal conversion or a conversion of convenience. All the while, the left would incessantly argue it was the latter, just another Trump trick to steal an election. Yet, by remaining himself and meeting public expectation, Trump has put the focus on Democrats' Achilles heel regarding authenticity. In collusion with their media cohorts, the Democrat establishment handpicked, undemocratically nominated candidate Kamala Harris is hurriedly being reintroduced to the electorate. It makes sense. As for her run in 2020 for the party's presidential, she received little support among her fellow Democrats. She actually didn't even make it to the first caucus in Iowa and is continually guarding unfavorable ratings, the worst ever to a vice president in history. Given she's the second highest ranking official in an admin whose disastrous domestic and foreign policy failures are legion, there is much to be reimagined, that is, rehabilitated. While the retconning of Vice President Harris transpires, the left will assume it has little to lose since the original fared so poorly in terms of popularity. But even poorly made original movies can be made worse when remade. What the original possessed was its authenticity, and while it might be a poor movie, its authenticity can render it entertaining, a flick so bad it's unintentionally good. But the even lesser remake is all but just a cynical, hubristic attempt to fool the public to pay for hot garbage that stings so badly. It's not remotely entertaining, just plain awful. Thus, the most effective way to brand Kamala Trump in his unapologetic authenticity are the perfect foil to Kamala's fakery. One of the many truly unprecedented tactics then candidate Trump has employed was, back in 2016, assign nicknames to his various opponents. Rather than random monikers or insults of the moment, each and every one was a carefully planned label that aimed to line up with preconceived notions about its target. There was low-energy Jeb, pointing out the red-headed stepchild of the late political dynasty was nowhere near as energizing or exciting as he needed for such a crucial election. Then there was little Marco, portraying the Florida senator as a small man who was simply not up to the big challenge of a presidential campaign. Then there was Lion Ted, feeding into the already held belief that the then upstart Texas senator was simply lying about every single thing he promised just to try to outpace Trump in the polls. And of course, who could forget perhaps the crowning achievement of Trump's nickname game, Crooked Hillary? While many adjectives would have suited her better than her infamous pantsuits, the word crooked played perfectly. into the image of Hillary as a corrupt member of the elite who escaped accountability for numerous crimes and other wrongdoings. Trump saw similar success with Sleepy Joe, an all too easy nickname for the oldest president in American history. His mental state is simply not there anymore. As long as the media tried to cover up his condition, it became unavoidable, and Trump and his fitting nickname for the 46th president was vindicated again. For what's almost certain to be Trump's final election, regardless of outcome, it's fitting he rolls out one last trend-say nickname with which to brand his final opponent. And while there's plenty of material to refer when it comes to Kamala, one adjective and thus one nickname stands out from the rest. Trump said it already at a rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris, most simply, is fake, fake, fake. Through the years, politicians of both parties have been called flip-floppers or liars, terms that perfectly fit Kamala. Candidates have been accused of being too radical or too willing to suddenly change their position for political convenience. But all of these descriptions and many more fall under the same umbrella when the word fake is used above all else. Kamala's recent about-face on immigration, with a new campaign ad pledging she will be tougher on the border than Donald Trump, is fake. Kamala's 180-degree turn on the matter of Israel, including a statement denouncing the anti-Semitic riots that have been tearing the country apart since October 7th, is fake. Kamala's rise to power, which objectively is only because of her race and her calculated choice in boyfriends at a young age, is fake. Her very appearance and identity are fake as it gets. Her smile and laugh are fake. Her blatant and repeated use of fake accents to address various audiences, just like one of the more infamous mistakes Hillary made in 2016. And yes, Trump is right. Even her racial identity is fake, fabricated, falsified, fiction. The real reason the Dems and mainstream media are melting down over Trump's question of Kamala's bizarre switch from Indian to black is not because of faux outrage over racism. They're panicked because they know it's one of the most effective, most powerful, and yet simple lines of attack that could possibly be used against a new presumptive nominee. And no other Republican would dare to go where Trump has gone, which reaffirms why he remains the left's biggest nightmare. Just today in Philadelphia, Kamala appeared with Tim Walz, governor Minnesota, her choice to be her VP candidate. I watched most of her speech, all of his. He speaks well. I like his manner. The problems with Walz are not in terms of his public persona, but reach a whole lot deeper. Excellent choice. Progressive applaud Harris. This is one of the catches, however. Walz has proven he has the necessary skills and authentic population go on offense, calling out the extremist and weird Trump-Vance agenda, but actually extreme and weird fits Kamala and Walz far better. Nominee Kamala has reportedly selected Walz as a running mate. Yes, a victory for progressive who pushed for Walz over Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro. Harris is expected to formally announce her choice. She did it today. CNN was first to report her decision. Progressives are energized by Walz's searing critiques of Trump-era Republican Party and his record as Minnesota governor, which includes his unequivocal championing of universal free school meals program, as well as paid family and medical leave. In Minnesota, we're cutting poverty and strengthening families with our child tax credit, Walz wrote in a social media post, calling out nominee Trump's running mate. You think J.D. Vance would be eager to do the same nationally, except he skipped a vote to pass a federal child tax credit expansion yesterday. Give me a break with that pro-family talk. Meanwhile, Retired National Guardsmen say Waltz embellished and selectively omitted facts about his military career. This is going to hurt. Vice President Harris picked Minnesota Governor Waltz as a running mate and will likely emphasize his military service as part of their campaign. But when Waltz was running for governor in 2018, former members of the National Guard spoke out about his service, with a retired command sergeant major saying he embellished and selectively omitted facts of his military career for years. In an open letter posted to Facebook, retired Command Sergeant Major Thomas Behrens and Paul Herr wrote Waltz retired just a few months after receiving a warning order that his battalion would be deployed to Iraq, even though he told military personnel he'd be going on the mission. On May 2016, 2005, Waltz quit, betraying his country, leaving the Iowa 125th Field Artillery Battalion and its soldiers hanging without its senior non-commissioned officer as the battalion prepared for war. The pair wrote Waltz said he needed to retire to run for Congress, but it was untrue. He could have run for Congress, requested permission from Second Defense before he entered active duty. If he had retired normally and respectfully, you would think he would have ensured his retirement documents were correctly filled out and signed, and he would have ensured he was reduced to master sergeant for dropping out of the academy, the two wrote. Instead, he slithered out the door and waited for the paperwork to catch up to him. Plus, we have the George Floyd event clearly staged, where he appears to have been complicit. So notice when George Floyd had been arrested, you can see the hair on his head. But when they throw him down on the ground, was that enough to knock his hair off? Just wondering, because I see he has hair, then all of a sudden doesn't. Here's interesting. Notice this. What happened when the body is picked up and put on a gurney? Check that out. Check that out. Check that out. No legs.
What am I gonna do about my legs?
Just embarrassingly bad. Here we have a Sigma 7 training dummy for airway passage that appears to have been used. American Torso Airway Trainer. The Advanced Airway Model. Priority Simulation of Human Issue Characteristics. I believe that's what we saw on the ground there. Totally fabricated. Led to the massive outrage, riots throughout the country, arson, looting, burning up buildings, which the Democrats celebrated as a summer of love and described as mostly peaceful. Scott, he appears to have played a role in all of this.
Well, the George Floyd event set off riots that were most likely part of a planned PSYOP, planned coordinated summer of violence for who knows for what purposes. But this Waltz character was front and center in facilitating that. That's the number one thing that they should strike, is his participation and his glorification of the blacks and the savages and the Antifa and all of these anarchist lunatics that want to tear down statues and burn America to the ground. Waltz is their cheerleader. And he got up there and gave a speech and said, it's, you can feel the energy, things are changing and this and that. And that is extraordinarily offensive to every American who doesn't want their children or families being subjected to that kind of trauma and horror. He was celebrating it, using it as a social paradigm shift. That's what needs to be branded on his forehead by the Trump campaign. This man, Waltz, if he has his way, will set off riots and violent actions all across America, like he did in Wisconsin in 2020. And Kamala Harris, of course, is responsible for an invasion of the United States, which is treason. She has committed treason against the American country by allowing this invasion, and Mayorkas and all of these conspirators who have flooded the country with illegal immigrants. And look at what has happened in Britain as a result of flooding Britain. You now have riots and a civil war with 3 little girls knifed. And how many other people in America have lost their lives or lost their little girls because of Kamala Harris and this Waltz guy? That's how you brand him. That's the winning tee shot if they do this. I hope and pray. And again, I still suspect there's some funny maneuvers coming down the lane. I don't trust that this is the final pick. I don't think we're going to be going into this casual election as usual. I think this Waltz guy is a placeholder. I've said before, and I'm not moving out, Gavin Newsom and Barack Obama still have a role in this, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be suspected if this Waltz guy is part of a musical chairs. They may take him out. Something may happen to Kamala, but there are a lot of things in movement. I think it's a great gift to put this Waltz guy as the vice president, because he's got so much negative, hostile baggage. Everybody in America, and look at his COVID-19 lockdown policies. That's the other thing to exploit, Jim. What did this son of a bitch do on the COVID-19 field? Did he lock down America? Did he throw people in jail? Did he force vaccine mandates? Did he fire people from their jobs? So they have to exploit his actions during the COVID-19 lockdown, as well as these riots. And he is a bully. They need to understand this guy by temperament is a bully. He's one of those types that's full of bravado. So, that needs to be, how do you handle a bully? You punch him in the nose and knock his ass down. So J.D. Vance has got to elevate his own testosterone and loudness to overwhelm the bullying that this Waltz guy is going to try and do. I know it. I've seen them, and I know how to handle them. Jim?
And I think Kamala can be taken out with just 2 words: border czar.
Yes. Yeah.
2 more stories that are rather revealing. Democrat Raskin says Congress will stop Trump from taking office even if he's chosen by the voters, and create civil war conditions. August 5th. Yesterday, he made this observation. Democrat Representative Jamie Raskin, earlier this year, said Congress will stop Trump on January 6, 2025, and create civil war conditions. The February 2024 video Raskin was making the rounds Monday. He said Congress will use the insurrection clause to stop Trump from taking office, even if he wins the 2024 election. What can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. Raskin said earlier this year at author Rick Hasson Book Talk and reading at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. Raskin said Congress will stop Trump on January 6, 2025, and issued a thinly veiled threat to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then they want to kick it to Congress, so it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified, and we need bodyguards for everyone in civil war conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the Great 14th Amendment means, Raskin said. where it's he who is the moron who's ignorant of the 14th Amendment. These uniparty snakes are the greatest threat to the country that's ever existed. They won't give up power without a fight. Look what American Thinker had to say about it way back when. Beginning on January 6, 2021, the government deep media state cabal sharply pivoted from accusing Trump of colluding with the Russians to steal the 2016 presidential election to incitement of insurrection, a charge for which he was impeached a second time. And now the farcical January 6 committee is recommending criminal charges. Britannica defines insurrection as an organized, usually violent act of revolt or rebellion against an established government or governing authority of nation, state, or other political entity by a group of its citizens or subjects. After Trump's supposed role in his January 6th speech, he promoted the First Amendment protection of freedom of speech and assembly and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Here are his exact words. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Trump went further, tweeting, I'm asking everyone at the Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. So, how was this a call for the violent overthrow of the government? This was no call for violent revolt or rebellion. In fact, Trump authorized National Guard troops. Only Speaker Pelosi and D.C. Mayor Browser could order deployment, and neither did. The January 6th Commission ignored it. Capitol Police welcomed the protesters inside the Capitol. The only death was at the hands of a Capitol Police officer, fatally shooting an unarmed female military veteran. Meanwhile, Trump attorney Sidney Powell was falsely accused by the corrupt American elite because she provided conclusive evidence that the 2020 election was stolen. Trump attorney Sidney Powell was falsely accused. Paul Craig Roberts writes, the corrupt Texas Bar Association tried to discipline Powell for bringing forth evidence they did not want revealed. But Texas Court of Appeals struck down the corrupt Texas Bar Association. Americans should know that even in conservative states, the institutions are controlled by left-wing ideologues. Not even red states can rely on their institutions. Here's a report about it. Kraken lawyer Sidney Powell wins unanimous dismissal of ethics case over scattershot and incompetent disciplinary effort by State Bar of Texas over 2020. Sidney Powell, an attorney for former President Trump, leaves a federal court in Washington on June 24, 2021. The so-called Kraken of the legal system has won a personal and professional victory in the Lone Star State. On Thursday, the Dallas-based Court of Appeals upheld a trial court decision that decided against any form of discipline for Attorney Powell over her November 2020 lawsuits that sought to prevent the certification of election results in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I remember when she put out this map showing the actual results of the election before the Dominion servers were seized in Germany. This will probably be removed, so share as much as possible. The fraud is massive. Trump had 410 electoral votes. Biden, 128. In early 2023, the case was tossed on defense motion to dismiss because of mislabeled evidence and other deficiencies. A three-judge panel of Democrat Party judges said the problems with the case against Powell were even worse than that. Related coverage? By its own admission, the bar misidentified or failed to include multiple exhibits it claims to have relied upon in its second amended response. The opinion by the 5th District Court of Appeals reads, but the deficiencies go far beyond mislabeling exhibits. According to the State Bar of Texas, Powell had no reason to believe the lawsuits she filed were not frivolous, and she attached evidence from wholly unreliable sources to the complaint she filed. The quasi-government attorney ethics group also alleged Powell relied on or made several false statements during her unsuccessful legal effort to undo the results of the 2020 presidential election. But she had it right. Americans in Susa to the court do not comprehend how the far left anti-American law schools have corrupted the minds of students. Soon there'll be no lawyers except extreme left-wing ideologues who have been taught that law is a weapon with which to destroy ideological enemies. He's got it exactly right, Scott. That's what we're up against. And you can find a parallel to how she was treated by how I have been treated in the courts of Wisconsin for exposing that Sandy Hook was not a mass murder, but a FEMA drill intended to promote gun control.
Yeah, before we end, Jim, I want you to give us a summary, a synopsis, just a quick story, if you can, a report on your case, your situation, the new changes that have happened. Let me just first comment on Sidney Powell and that whole thing. I was there in November 2020 with Stephen Pidgeon. I prepared reports and gave them to Sidney Powell, gave them to General Flynn, gave them to Patrick Byrne about Dominion voting machines being corrupted by the Chinese Communist Party, Staple Street Capital, and Union Bank of Switzerland. That should have launched and triggered an emergency national military response because of foreign intervention. All sorts of other things should have and could have happened, and nothing did. And I hold them responsible for a terrible dereliction of duty, and Trump is responsible for a lot of this too. They should have got on top of all of this 6 to 12 months before it happened, and it wasn't. It was clumsily handled. And yes, I know he was stabbed in the back, but our country, and I take this personally because our country, since Trump was overthrown in this coup, has experienced nothing but the destruction of the dollar, the destruction of our reputation, a foreign invasion, a Bolshevik takeover of this country, and war against Russia, war against Iran, the consolidation of the world against us in forming of the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation, all of these economic groups divorcing itself from the dollar. And what's happening in Britain is another sign of that. The entire civilization has experienced a wrecking because of what happened on November or December of 2023 or 2020, before Trump was kicked out. And it's devastated the country. And quite honestly, I say this because I do think only a civil war can correct this. I think only a civil war is going to remedy these fanatics in the Democrat Party, because they're not Democrats anymore. They're communist Bolshevik tyrants that are their agenda is to kill every white person they can and rule a Negroid Kalergi plan repopulation of this country. And I think only a civil war is going to remedy that. And it's tragic, but anything else will be kabuki theater. But Jim, I'll hand it to you to get your thoughts on that, and also on your summary case. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just give a thumbnail sketch. I was sued in late 2018. The case dragged out through 2019. And even though I had a mountain to prove, I was being sued over having declared a death certificate for one of the purported decedents at Sandy Hook to be fake, which was a result of my bringing together 13 experts, including 6 PhDs, in establishing that the school had been closed by 2008, that there were no students or teachers there, and that it was a FEMA drill presented as mass murder to promote gun control, for which I even had the FEMA manual, which I included as Appendix A to the book. Now, I'm under a court order that I can't assert this death certificate to be fake, but that's what I was sued over, asserting the death certificate to be fake in 3 sentences in the book, and in another, in a separate Sandy Hook Truth Memorandum, co-edited with Robert David Steele for then President Donald Trump. And the case was very strange. The evidence I had was so massive. And when I studied, the principles that were going to be applied in my case, I felt very, very confident. But the judge systematically began eliminating all my proof from the beginning. One of his very first rules was that I couldn't offer any evidence that nobody had died at Sandy Hook because, according to him, and this is both logically and legally absurd, whether anybody died at Sandy Hook had nothing to do with the truthfulness or the authenticity of a death certificate for somebody who's reported to have died at Sandy Hook, a multiple gunshot. It was this level of absurdity, Scott.
And see, let me just comment on that, Jim, because you could have and should have and still can file a challenge of the jurisdiction of the court. Your Honor, this court does not have jurisdiction over this case. You have a motion and a right to assert challenge of jurisdiction. I know it's a appealable principle. And the reason you can file a challenge of jurisdiction is because nobody died at Sandy Hook. There was no event. So therefore, the court has no jurisdiction over an event that didn't occur. Something else occurred, but not the event that the court defines as happening the way the court says. So the court has no jurisdiction, and here's the proof of it. That wasn't done, and as a result, they claim jurisdiction. And when they claim jurisdiction, they can do exactly what they've done. They can chop and cut and keep out everything and anything. So always remember, the challenge of the jurisdiction of the court is the first foundation to say you don't even have a right to hear a single word out of this in this court, because what you're saying happened never happened.
Well, that's technically what's known as extrinsic fraud, Scott, and I brought a case to reopen based on extrinsic fraud and then fraud upon the court, which is done when officers of the court, in this case, the judge and the Posner attorneys, acted in collusion to deny me my right to a trial by jury and to exclude all my proofs by the simple expedient of not admitting them as evidence. So I had 100 lines of proof, including government documents such as the FBI Consolidated Crime Report for 2012, showing at the intersection of murder and non-negligent manslaughter for Newtown, Connecticut, of which Sandy Hook is a division, zero. You would have thought right there that would have been sufficient to have to send the case to a jury. But what the judge was very cleverly doing was excluding systematically one measure after another all of my proof, not admitting it as evidence, so he could claim there was no disputed facts. And if there are no disputed facts, then he could apply the principle of the process of summary judgment and make a ruling. So I focused only on the death certificate. Well, I filed counterclaims for abuse of process because this lawsuit was improperly motivated, for fraud and theft by deception, because the parties who are getting all this money through donations from the public were deceiving them, and for fraud upon the court.
Yes.
And the judge bifurcated the case. He said I could only pursue those after the case itself had been resolved, where normally they go on concurrently because through discovery you might get evidence that affects both, but he didn't want that to happen. So he focused solely on the death certificate. In the meanwhile, the bar is lower if I'm not a journalist, but I am a journalist.
Yes.
I gave him, 8 or 11 pages of my history as a journalist, including paid assignments. And nevertheless, he never ruled on whether or not I was a journalist, which was ridiculous when you consider I was being sued over 3 sentences in a book that I'd co-authored and co-edited, and in another to which I'd contributed multiple chapters. How could I not be a journalist? But he never ruled. See, that was very clever. This guy gave a lot of thought to what he was doing. So I submitted the reports of two, not one, but two forensic document experts who concluded not only was the death certificate that I had published fake, but the death certificate, a different complete death certificate attached to the complaint, was fake. And two others that had been obtained from the state and from the town of Newtown, all four of them were fake. You'd think that would be decisive. They didn't have an opposing expert. The judge just set them aside as unhelpful. That's all he did, Scott, unhelpful. Now, he went ahead and ruled against me. And they brought in, they actually suborned perjury by bringing in a witness who was not the Sandy Hook Leonard Posner, who was supposedly the plaintiff who was bringing the lawsuit. The guy was younger and smaller. And I was sure this wasn't the crime scene Leonard Posner. So I sought to expose the fraud. And when I shared the video deposition, which I'd been given to understand I could do in my legal defense with Wolfgang Halbig for confirmation, the judge held me in contempt and awarded attorney fees for $650,000 in addition to the $450,000 that the jury, consisting of 12 citizens, the oldest was 31 men and 11 women, all of whom affirmed they'd never even heard of Alex Jones. I mean, if you can believe. So I had this $1.1 million judgment hanging over me. I went to the Court of Appeals, Wisconsin, even the U.S. Supreme Court, to no avail. And I think it's because they simply accepted the judge's claim that I had no evidence. But I only had no evidence because he hadn't admitted any of my proofs. So, Scott, it took me years to sort out and figure out how to get a handle on it. And I got a break when this same fake witness had appeared down in Florida in a case against Wolfgang, got a speeding ticket. And they took photographs of him. So now we actually even had an address. And Wolfgang shared it with me. And while he initially thought there were three Leonard Posners, he thought there was the crime scene Posner, older, bigger, substantially, the one who'd appeared in his case and got the speeding ticket, and then mine, Brian Davidson. I asked him to evaluate what Wolfgang had put together, and he established there were only two, that the one who'd appeared in his court and got the speeding ticket, and in my trial were all the same. But so now I had evidence of suborning perjury by the Posner attorneys. So in mid-June, I'm talking this June, this July, I said I submitted a motion to open judgment pursuant to extrinsic fraud and fraud upon the court. The brief was about 26 pages. I had 26 supporting exhibits A to Z, 548 pages of supporting documents, including affidavits from Wolfgang and from Brian Davidson. The judge immediately rejected. Now, he's not allowed to do that. You get a motion. You got to put it on the docket. You got a brief. You got to get a response from the plaintiff and then a reply from me, but he didn't do it. He just rejected it. So I submitted a second request for relief from judgment, explained to the judge what he had to know, that he'd violated the Wisconsin rules of civil procedure.
Yes.
And he did it again. And he did it again. And then another, the Posner attorney, because they wanted to conceal all this information from the public, requested a motion to seal the record. And he immediately did it. So not once, not twice, three times in a row, he violated the Wisconsin rules of civil procedure. And Scott, that's enabled me to go to the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. And in the meanwhile, because it's so blatant, I filed a motion to recuse the judge.
Deprivation of your rights under color of law.
Yes. Fraud upon the court, the whole bit. I mean, because I'd figured out how he did it.
Yeah.
That was something I hadn't quite grasped. You know, I knew something was totally wrong.
Yes.
But that was really this issue of admissibility, that all my proof hadn't mattered because he never admitted it. So now I have a motion for recusal. It was sent out to the plaintiff for a response. I rebutted their response very thoroughly. and reduce it in a 6-page brief. Now, Scott, this case has been going for 6 years. There are over 600 documents. I reduced it to a 6-page brief with 7 key points. And right now, that is before the court. And I'll just tell you, I think that the Court of Appeals is alarmed that the chief judge for the Dane County Circuit Court is alarmed. I think there's a real chance I may turn this because it was so unjust. The evidence is so overwhelming, and I have done what your friend described. I've been a battering ram. I've just submitted brief after brief, and they're so powerful, and they're so forceful and argumentative, and it's with such precision. I think I've actually got a chance of dumping this whole thing. By the way, the first book on my lawsuit is about to appear in print.
Yes,
and
I was just going to say
there will be.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and mark my words, there will be others.
All of your work, all of your legal writing, all of your motions should be compiled into a book because it is a lesson in law. It is a summary of the entire case. It's an expose of corruption. You could even attach your original Sandy Hook book as an exhibit. It's not for publication. It's attached as an exhibit.
Well, let me mention to everyone out there, I created a redacted version. And you can download the redacted version if you go to my blog at jameshfetzer.org and go to, it's right now on the 3rd page, maybe the 4th, Fake News, The Truth versus Alex Jones. You can download both the redacted book and the redacted memorandum, Sandy Hook Truth for Donald Trump, for free to your own computer. Do it. I mean, when they first banned the book by Amazon, Scott, which happened less than a month after it went on sale in 2015, I released it for free as a PDF. That was the curveball they hadn't anticipated.
Yes.
Because it's been downloaded millions of times. They'd used the lawsuit to claim the book, and it was done completely improperly in violation of Wisconsin protocols. If I'm lucky, if I'm right about this, I'm going to have the whole thing reversed. But in the meanwhile, everyone can download the book and the redacted edition and the Sandy Hook Truth memorandum for Trump.
See, it's an amazing time we live in, Jim. God calls us into these fights. He raises us up. I never imagined I'd go through what I went through, but I learned law much in the same way that you've learned it, by writing motions upon motions and understanding the Constitution, understanding civil procedures, criminal procedures. That's how you learn real law and wield it like a gladiator, is by going through these fights, and you are transformed from iron to steel. The metamorphosis, the translation of you as a person is extraordinarily profound when you go through this. And they know this, and they are going to be running scared of you now and fearful of you now because you've got them on the run. You're the hunter, and they're bleeding because their corruption and their evil and their conspiracy, which is a violation of every American's rights. It's the corruption of the highest level. It is just the most disgusting kind of corruption when you use the courts and the judges to do this sort of a thing. But it is precisely what needs to be battled, and loudly and publicly. And congressmen and senators should be on your side about this, because it's all about the facts. The facts of Sandy Hook in the documents and the research that you've done are unchallengeable. And that's where Alex Jones has failed and fallen down. You and you alone have carried that guide on, and you've refused to let it fall. And in your case lives the spirit of freedom of the United States of America. And that's why it's so critical to continue holding that guide on tall and straight, that you will never surrender the truth. You will never back down. And by looking these judges and these lawyers in the eye and letting them know, I know exactly what you're doing. Watch them fall backwards like the Jews fell backwards when Christ said, I am he. So I applaud your efforts, and it's a noble work, and everyone should contribute to your legal defense and your legal fund and get the book. Jim?
Well, I do appreciate too, Scott, how many times you've talked about the violation of constitutional rights under cover of law. I put that right there in my motion. So I want you to know I'm indebted to you for making that point so many times it sank in.
Mm-hmm. Well, we stand with you, Jim, and I know Americans stand with you as one of the great Americans who has done more for this country by standing up for the truth than really anyone I know. And it's a small team of men, and there's a few women mixed in, but Halbig is key, Paul Craig Roberts, so many others that want to remain too quiet. But we have a extraordinarily gifted group of American patriots, and I think they all pray and support you very passionately. So God bless you. Thank you for joining us on Great Awakenings, and thank you for your support. We will see you next time. God bless. Good night.